Hi, so this is a video subject I've wanted to touch on for a while now, and I haven't really prepared this because it's coming from a point of conviction, and that's never difficult for me to prepare because I just speak my mind. I want to talk a bit about the concept of toxic masculinity, as I take it. Um, there are some guys who say it doesn't exist, it's just a feminist invention. I don't entirely agree with that. Perhaps in the way it's used, um, it's it's hyperbole or it's overused. I'm certainly no fan of third wave feminism. I'm critical of a lot of the way they look at things. Um, but this is a subject that does require some reflection because it's not something that can just be dismissed. And I would say to other guys out there, and maybe guys who are critical of feminism as I am, to hear me out, because I do think there is a problem with this. I do think there is a problem within male circles of a certain type of behavior and attitude that is not good for men. It's not good for other men, and it's not good for society in general. Um, So first of all, let me just address what I interpret to be the feminist reckoning of what toxic masculinity is, because they have popularized the term. So, for example, we look at the Sarah Everard case, the young woman who was murdered in London a few months ago by the police officer. Um, uh, a former colleague of mine, wouldn't call her a friend, she's an acquaintance. We're not that close, but we work together in China, teacher in Scotland. She had a post on her Facebook profile saying that she would deliver a lesson to her students on toxic masculinity. I was tempted to follow up, but I didn't because I don't really like criticizing fellow teachers. But my question is, or rather, I was thinking to myself, well, maybe I should have said something, but I was thinking, well, are you going to, teach the girls to be precautious? Are you going to kind of shame the boys in your class? Are you going to generalize men? What sort of picture are you going to take with this? I do think that with the Sarah Everard case, there were feminists who were kind of hijacking that for their own agenda, their anti male agenda. And, when we hear nonsense like men need to step up, it's nonsense because what exactly is a regular guy supposed to do? I mean, if I see a woman being abused, there's several things I can do. I can, if it's a single guy, I can maybe tackle him. I can maybe confront him. Hopefully, it wouldn't turn physical, but if it did, I could possibly take on a single guy. Although, uh, you know, uh, street fights are something that should be avoided. But if it's a group, then no matter how brave you are or how noble you are, you can't take on a gang. So in that situation, probably I would call the police and maybe try and provide a distraction or something. Um, but you don't need to play hero in terms of because you can't. No matter how physically tough or brave you are, a single guy in 99% of circumstances cannot take on a gang. I think there might be a kind of natural instinct now. If a gang was attacking a woman very close to me, say a female relative or single at the moment, but if I had a girlfriend, then caution would be thrown to the wind. I'd be like a tiger. I would go in there. I'd probably get beaten, but it would just be a natural instinct. But a woman I don't know, that would be more a case of, well, I'll try and contact the police or provide a distraction or something. But the idea of men stepping up, I'd like to know exactly what feminists mean by that, or women's campaigners mean by that, because what do you expect an ordinary guy to do? I mean, it's kind of this idea that if the average Joe saw something happening, he would turn a blind eye. But most men wouldn't. They would intervene in some way, whether it be verbally trying to confront the guy or, they would do something. So that's one issue I take with that notion of men need to step up. How? I mean, you cannot hold the average guy responsible for some crackpot, some psychopath, some rapist who is doing what he's doing. The responsibility of the average guy is to condemn it, and to, accept that something needs to be done about it in terms of perhaps legislation, perhaps police actions. But this collective responsibility, I don't agree with. I think it's nonsense. That's like saying to all women to be responsible for, a really misandrous woman, or say a mother who abuses her children. That's like saying all women should be responsible for that. It's ridiculous. So, in terms of what the feminists mean by toxic masculinity, I think they're particularly thinking of sexual offenders and sleazy guys who, don't know that no means no, which taps into the whole Me Too thing. And I think the term kind of became popularized around that time. It probably predates that. I don't know what the exact origins of the term are, but I imagine it probably predates that, but became popularized around the time of the Me Too movement in, let's say, 2017, 2018. But from a male perspective, how do I see the idea of toxic masculinity? It's not a term I would probably use, but I will use it for this video just so that people know what I'm talking about. But I prefer to use the term negative masculinity. Because the problem with saying toxic masculinity is it implies that the very idea of being masculine is a bad thing in itself, and I don't think it is. I think positive masculinity can be a very good thing, you know? Um, I think there is some feminists who believe that all masculinity is bad. Radical feminists, this isn't the average feminist, but radical feminists believe that masculinity in general is bad because it must always lead to female subjugation, or have this idea of really braggadocious, arrogant guys who throw their weight around. But that really isn't what masculinity is about. See, to me, masculinity means a lot of things, and it's not something that is necessarily or should necessarily be set in stone. But off the top of my head, I would say it is about being the best man you can be by being true to yourself, by not hurting people more vulnerable than yourself, um, not using your physical strength, for example, to abuse a woman or a child. Um, Self defense in the case of women is a bit different, but this is about being a decent man, right? Responsibility is certainly a big part of it. Not blaming the rest of the world for your problems, standing up for yourself for sure, but also being responsible. And to me, that is not job status. This is probably where I would part with some other guys. I don't think it's about what sort of job you have, or even having a job. You can have a guy who happens to be unemployed, but he's still a decent man. He's still trying to, he's trying to get a job. He's trying to move forward. You could have a guy who has a job, but his values are crap. He treats people badly. He could be a boss who abuses his staff. He could be, I don't know, an employee who treats co-workers badly. So I really don't make an association with job status and positive masculinity. Obviously, it's better to have a job. It's better to have that stability in your life. But I wouldn't, you know, perhaps it comes from empathy. I've been unemployed. I don't, I certainly don't judge a guy for being unemployed. It does get a bit complicated, obviously, in a relationship. Women look for stability, but I'm not going to judge an individual guy just because he doesn't have a job or what sort of job he has. Um, I would say positive masculinity is about being your best self, listening to the better angels of your nature, being true to yourself, not abusing power. That's an extremely important one. So if you have a police officer or a soldier or a security guard, or a politician or a guy who's in a position of power in some way or form, and he abuses that power, that's not positive masculinity. That's negative masculinity because he's using that power for a negative reason. Having said that, especially in Western society, all those jobs I've just named, women can also do. So you could have a female police officer who abuses her power, a female politician who abuses her power, and so on. So that is a bit more blurred now in the Western context. Um, the truth is, most men are probably quite decent. I half the people I've known in my life are men, obviously, and most of them I've got on well with. I thought he's a decent guy. I had some maybe not great friends, but the average bloke I meet is a decent man. That's the truth. And yeah, there's some guys I meet I don't like. They're a bit cocky, arrogant. I don't like the way they treat people in general. I've met those guys. Now, at this point, I want to come to what I interpret as negative masculinity. Um, there is a culture, and it can be found all over the world, but it is a problem in the UK. And it's this kind of macho thing where you kind of get a group dynamic. And it's predominantly young men, but sometimes this extends to guys right in the middle age. So some guys don't grow up, they still behave this way in their 50s. But more broadly, it is younger guys. And the dynamic is as follows. Usually it's in the context of, let's say, a sporting event, or sometimes in a school dynamic. Um, and basically, it's this sense of empowerment in numbers. So, you get a group of five guys, let's say young guys, and they've had a few drinks, right? They get on public transport and they're all trying to prove something to one another. And the problem is they end up just behaving like yobs, to use a British colloquialism. And the problem with that is it imposes on other people. Personally, I get a little bit anxious when I see a group of drunks get on a train because it's an enclosed space. You can't go anywhere. You have to just put up with them. I mean, you shouldn't have to, that's what happens. And the problem is when you get guys in that dynamic, they feel invincible. They feel like they're Alexander the Great. Um, and it actually can be a very negative thing. So this is what you get in a dynamic, particularly at sporting events. And I would say it's two sports more than any other. You see this problem, and that is in the UK, football and boxing. You probably get it at other sports as well, but particularly those two, where you get guys who just have no self control and they feel empowered because they're with their mates and they don't know when to stop drinking. Often alcohol is a factor, not always, but more often than not it is. And they just behave like animals. They throw their weight around, they verbally abuse strangers, and it's disgusting. Now, that to me is not positive masculinity. If there is a toxic masculinity, it's that sort of thing. By the same token, you get this group dynamic where, particularly around, let's say, prowess with women. So, you get a group of, again, it's mostly young guys, and a big thing is about virginity, right? So there's huge peer pressure on young men. I would say there's peer pressure on young people in general, but there is peer pressure on young men, and a big thing would be, well, who's the virgin in the group? Let's laugh at them, let's mock them. And here's the thing: it might be that that person has had experience or they haven't, but let's say they haven't. The consequences on that guy's mental health is going to be profound because not only is he going to be feeling lonely, but he's going to be feeling like, are these guys, what sort of friends would laugh at me over this? So I think there is definitely a very thin line between banter and just cruelty. And I do think too often banter is used as an excuse in this sort of dynamic. It pisses me off. Um, I'm not saying that every group of young men is like that. I'm not demonizing young men. If a group of young guys are just minding their own business, they're doing something they enjoy, maybe they're a little bit vocal, but it comes down to that line. And what I would say to any young guy watching this, you're an individual, okay? You're not what your mates define you as. You don't have to prove anything to them. And this is the fine line between being being a man and being an idiot. Um, if you're influenced by the guys around you and you feel you have to prove something to them all the time, then you need to grow up. You need to just find yourself. I'm not for a second saying, by the way, there's anything wrong with that group dynamic in of itself. I am saying that it can lead to something negative, and that's a problem because you're betraying yourself. You're not allowing yourself to be distinguished, to be an independent guy who thinks for himself. Point one, and point two, you're imposing on other people. You know, if you're going down the street mouthing off, maybe you think it's banter, but other people walking by, especially if they're older people, they might be intimidated by that, and you might think, well, oh, I'm not doing them any harm. I don't mean them any harm. But try and put yourself in their shoes. If you get a group of five, physically fit young guys going down the street, shouting at each other, just messing around, it's simply a case of, well, what about other people? Now, I appreciate not everyone would agree with this. I'm not for a second saying let's get all young guys to be choir boys or, super, like, I don't know, Stepford husbands or something. Not at all. Young guys will have a good time, right? They'll have energy. All that. Cool. I've no problem with that. All I'm saying is I think that there is a dynamic where some guys can't control themselves and they just have to feed off one another. It's very unpleasant for other people. So for me, it's not just banter. It's not okay. And I don't really give a damn what people think of that. Um, and frankly, I do think there are too many guys who will make excuses for this. They're not necessarily like this themselves, but they'll make excuses for it. They'll say, "Oh, it's just some young guys having fun." It's not. I mean, I've seen this mentality. I spoke earlier today about the Chris Whitty incident. Professor Chris Whitty, the government advisor, two guys were haranguing him in London. I'd say they were about my age, maybe in their 30s, late 30s. People were excusing this on the Sun's video. They were saying, "Oh, it's just guys having banter. Oh, they're just hugging him," and they're basically trying to defend this behavior. But it's not cool. They have no right to treat a stranger that way just because he's a public figure. That's something I do not accept. This idea that what's banter to one person, everyone else should just accept. You have no damn right to put your hands on anyone and say, "Oh, it's just banter." Um, I think the people excusing it, they wouldn't like themselves treated like that. So I do think there's a problem with negative masculinity. How does this extend then when we're talking about treatment of women? I think, and again, this is a contentious point, but I believe it is verifiable. I believe there's empirical evidence to show this. The way that rap music talks about women, it's incredibly crude and negative. And to be fair, some female rappers don't help. They, the whole industry. I do not like rap. I do not like the messages that come out of that particular genre. I mean, frankly, look up any rap artist, and there's a pretty strong chance he'll have a criminal record. But rap is just there's so much negativity coming out of it. It's all about fast money and getting loads of girls and drugs, and you might say some of that stuff can be found in, for example, rock music, but I think rap has a very negative influence on young guys, and I think it does glorify gang culture. And it's no good saying, "Oh, it's just a form of art." You can take anything, right? You can describe anything as a form of art if you push hard enough. That doesn't mean it is, and it doesn't mean it doesn't have a negative influence. So, to be more specific, drill music is literally, um, young guys, mostly young black guys, making threats to rival gang members and trying to humiliate rival gang members in their songs. That's toxic. It has a toxic influence on society because then you get innocent people sometimes getting caught in the crossfire of gangs. And anyone who speaks out about this is one or two things. They'll either be accused of being censorious and, oh, they don't understand the art, or they'll even be accused of racism because it tends to be associated more with uh, black people. But to me, that's not the issue. At least it shouldn't be. The issue should be the negative messaging that's coming out of that. I mean, I should say, I don't think this is all rap. Perhaps I should clarify. I don't think it's all rap. I think, for example, take Coolio, Gangsta's Paradise. That was a good song. It had a good tune, but it also had a good message, which is gang lifestyle is punitive. You'll end up dead in your early 20s. That was the message of that song. So it was more intelligent than some of the rubbish that's out there today, which really is about just drugs and fast cash, and it's just a sleazy, nasty message to me. Um, so I think that's negative masculinity, because I've seen young guys with this mentality that if they sort of emulate rap stars, they'll be a real man. But that's not being a real man. A real man is first responders, right? A real man is guys who risk their life for their country on the front line. Um, and actually, even the term real man is probably contentious. But if we are going to talk about it, you know, that sort of respect and honor should be going towards guys who have integrity, who have some values. Where are the values with rap artists? Maybe there's a few exceptions. Probably shouldn't generalize, right? But I just think that there is a negative message to young men. But here's the thing: whilst I challenge that, I also challenge the feminist idea that all masculinity is negative. So, what I would counter is I've heard of mass shootings in the US where guys literally threw themselves over their girlfriends to protect them. Now, those are real men. Where's the toxic masculinity there? They're being masculine. I mean, that probably gets into a whole other debate about gun issues, but just the principle that they would be willing to risk their own lives to protect the woman they love, that's masculinity. I mean, it shouldn't have to be that way. I'm not saying we should be cavalier about that, but I would. And I just know from experience, I'm not the biggest guy, I'm not the toughest guy, but I know I have enough alpha in me to do that because I've been in a situation where I'll give an example. I was with a female friend when I was in China, and we were chatting. I met her for the day. She's an old friend. We're very close. And this Australian guy came up, older man, probably in his 50s. And he was quite drunk. And he was being really sleazy. And I was quite protective of her. I kind of got him to back off and just. I mean, he's making sleazy comments, and it's just a male instinct, right? Now, what sort of man would I be if I was to just ignore that? Oh, I don't want the confrontation. It's there's certain things guys have to do. Otherwise, forget what everyone else thinks. It's about yourself. Can you look yourself in the mirror? So, as a man, I could not sort of stand by and watch someone vulnerable be abused and not doing anything about it. That's just built into me. It's instinctive. It's not about bravado. I'm not saying I'm the toughest guy or I'm the bravest guy, but it's just built in. It's like in my DNA. And I would suggest it's in the DNA of most guys. So, summed up, what I would respectfully say to feminists is the issue is not masculinity, right? A guy can have a sort of more conservative, let's say hunter gatherer mindset, but still be a decent man. I think the mistake feminists make is conflating this negative behavior you get with some young guys with, or I shouldn't say young guys, you get with some guys and associate that with the whole male sex. I mean, a guy doesn't have to be better to be a good man. I mean, in the UK, I'll just briefly touch on this because I think it is important. We do have a problem with job culture, and it isn't just men. You get it with women as well. But I would suggest that where exists with women. You know, that ladette culture, that's kind of a byproduct of lad culture. And feminists kind of condone it because, oh, they're empowered. Well, it's just as ugly and just as obnoxious. You know, when I'm on public transport and some drunk gets on and they're mouthing off to strangers, or even worse, on a plane, um, that's something that shouldn't be glorified or justified in any way. It's obnoxious. It's selfish. I think it should be. I think it should result in punishment because why the hell should the rest of us have to put up with it? Um, but you know, it's like football hooligans. Britain is notorious for this, and we're not the only country. It's a huge issue in North African countries like Morocco and Algeria and Turkey. Um, you know, looking elsewhere, Turkey as well, Russia. But that's very much a negative masculinity. This idea that power in numbers is somehow brave. And even in the most ugly form, you get these gang attacks, you know, where it's just, it's like rabid. You get a gang who will chase an individual and in some cases beat them to death. I don't even like to say that because this happens. It's happened in London, and elsewhere. It's disgusting, and it's the opposite of manliness. It's absolute cowardice. Absolute cowardice. And if I was a judge presiding over a case like that, I would tell them that they are cowards, they're not men. What we need to do is take away this idea that gang culture is masculinity or is manliness. Well, I guess it is a form of masculinity, but it's not one that should be promoted. Um, I'm not being puritanical with this. I'm not saying, for example, let's say the film The Warriors, the 1978 film, that's about gangs. But again, if you look at that film, because it's all case by case basis here, look at the film. It's about a gang, right? They're criminals, but they need to survive the night and get through New York City without being attacked. It's not glorifying violence against others. It's about their survival. So that's a bit different than the rap culture we see today, in my opinion. Anyway, that's just my thoughts, but I just think it's a case of it's not about being braggadocious, it's not about being physically the toughest guy, it's not about getting in people's faces. It's about being true to yourself, it's about having values, and it's about not abusing people weaker than yourself. This doesn't mean, by the way, being okay with women who are being disrespectful to you, or, you know, if you're a father, you need to have a balance with discipline. I'm not talking about that. I'm just saying, you know, guys who beat up women just because they can are the scum of the earth. Um, you know, that is abhorrent. And there are cultures in the world that you get this problem the world over. But I do think there's some cultures that kind of normalize it, and that's despicable. You know, and in terms of sexual assaults, you do get this mentality with some young guys. I remember, and I'll close with this other anecdote. I was going to a boxing club that I was at the time, and a young guy came with me. He's from Hong Kong. Now, he wasn't a bad guy, really, but I remember a friend of mine was there, a female friend, but she wanted to see what it was about. And he said to me, "Is that your bitch?" I said, "Well, yeah, that's my friend." I sort of spoke to him like that. He wasn't a bad guy. He wasn't, you know, a potential rapist or something, but I saw in him the naivety of a young guy who maybe could go down the wrong direction. Now, I didn't sort of bring him to the side and have a wise old man talk. I did say it that way. I said, "Yeah, she's my friend, right? She's not my bitch. She's my friend. You know, show a little respect." And I said it in that tone, but I didn't want to be kind of over the top because I don't think he was really a bad guy. He wasn't. In fact, he was just a young guy who thought that that is the way to talk. And it's not. And it's that sort of mentality that needs to be challenged. Anyway, this was a longer video, but I think it was an important one. Thanks for watching.